So here we have a V1 turbo. This turbo is blowed up, so I've already dismantled this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure our inlet size, and that's on the outside here. Doesn't really have any effect on the actual compressor, but it's information you're going to want to know. So let's measure that. This is all going to be in millimeters because we need to get with the program because the rest of the world uses this. So it is 43.49 millimeters, which if you really want to know is 1.7 inches. So now we're going to slide that aside. This is the V2. The V2 is 37.32 millimeters or 1.4 inches. So it's about a quarter of an inch smaller on the inlet. But where things get interesting, if we take these compressor housings off, is the wheel size. So just looking at that, you can pretty much tell that there's a pretty distinct difference in wheel size there. So I'm going to measure the wheel size. So the outside of the wheel on the V1 is 1.7 inches or 45 millimeters. The wheel on the V2 is 41 millimeters or 1.6 inches. So we've got a pretty significant difference in the overall size of the wheel as far as the base goes. If we look at the actual inner part, which is what you actually see on the intake, you're going to notice there's an even bigger difference. So on the V1 we have 1.46 inches or 37 millimeters, and on the V2 we have 34.9 millimeters or 1.3 inches. So the compressor wheel is significantly smaller on here, and now I'm going to explain why. The version 2 engine has a bumping compression. The compression is raised in the version 2 compared to the version 1. So what that means, you actually need less turbo and less boost to make the exact same amount of horsepower. And by running less boost, you do get better cruising miles per gallon and better cruising emissions. So they reduced the size of the turbocharger on the V2 because they increased the compression. So that's why that is that way. So let's now look at the exhaust side of things. I'm just going to put this on here. I know the turbo's blowing up, but still. Now the exhaust is a whole nother beast to measure. I'm actually going to disassemble this so we can get the exhaust out, and I'm going to disassemble this one and we'll be right back. Alright, so we have the center housings from a version 1 and a version 2 here. So now we're going to measure the exhaust wheel, which even visibly you can see there's one hell of a difference there. Alright, so let's start with the version 2. Let's set this to 0 millimeters. So the version 2 exhaust wheel is 37.94 millimeters or 1.4 inches. That's tiny. The one on the version 1 is 1.67 inches or 42.71 millimeters. So significant difference in the exhaust wheel. But if we look at exhaust housings, there's a major problem on the V1s when you try to do something like a Mamba turbo, which is just a bigger compressor wheel on the factory housing. If you look inside there, it's extremely small. The amount of air that can fit through that hole is extremely limited, which means you need to run more boost to create more power in the engine, but eventually you start choking the engine. It can't get enough exhaust gases out. You're not going to make any more horsepower. That problem is significantly made worse on the version 2, which has an even smaller outlet. The only thing that helps the version 2 and why it is able to make even the horsepower it's making is because of the way that the housing is designed. Now on the version 1, it's just the wastegate and then that's it. It comes out, there's nothing really else going on there. Got a 2.5 inch hole and that's it. On the version 2, we have a way bigger opening exactly off the turbo and right where the wastegate actuator is. Now you'll notice that the oxygen sensor sits right in there, and there's an EGT sensor that sits right back there. So that allows for more air to come out a little quicker, but then the big problem is the downpipe that comes right after it. This right here is a version 2 downpipe. The version 2 downpipe, if you'll notice, the catalytic converter is exactly after the turbo. So that cavity then immediately fills up with the air that came out of the turbo, creating a shit ton of back pressure. Now, if you'll notice when you dyno tune a 6-speed version 2 versus a 6-speed version 1, the torque numbers are like way off. And this right here is one of the big reasons. This is extremely efficient, it makes for great emissions, but a terrible design for making torque out of a turbocharged engine. The version 1 downpipe has the catalytic converter further down, which means that you can get a little more exhaust gas in there before it creates any sort of positive pressure, which means the turbo can spool up for a little bit longer before you have any problems. So that is a comparison of the turbochargers between a V1 MR16 and a version 2 MR16. Obviously, as you can tell by all that information, they way downsized for the version 2. It's becoming a trend on these smaller engines to put really tiny turbochargers to make a ton of low-end torque and sacrifice your top-end performance. Because let's face it, most people don't drive outside of 3,000 RPM every single day. Hi, you made it through a whole video. I appreciate that. You should go check out our other videos. You should also go check out our website, thefastreligion.com. We got like sweatshirts and t-shirts and stuff.